Good morning, everyone. I suggest that people who are sitting there maybe move a little bit because if not, you will not have a good view on the presentation. I'm Bruno De Lille. As I said, I am a member of Groen. Groen is the Dutch-speaking Greens in Belgium. I've been a city councillor and a deputy mayor in the city of Brussels. I am now a member of parliament of the Brussels capital region, and before 2014 I was the state secretary for mobility, equal opportunities and culture of that same Brussels capital region. And today I'm going to tell you about my personal experiences as a Green politician, both while being in the opposition and in the majority. Heavy stuff, of course. Well, to make it a little lighter, I've brought some personal documentation for you. It's 50 Shades. No, not 50 Shades of Grey, it's 50 Shades of Green. As I said, it's my personal story. Well, actually, 50 Shades would be a bit of an overstatement. It's more like 7. I'm a very modest man. And don't you worry, I've left my whip and my handcuffs in my hotel room. So let's take a look at what's in the book. There are 7 very tempting subjects, 7 very interesting chapters. First, I want you to need me. Second chapter is, I want it that way. The third one is, take me to your heaven. The fourth is, let's try something new. The fifth, let's do it together. I could have named that also, it's more fun when you have multiple partners, but we come later to that. And the sixth one is, talk dirty to me. And of course, the conclusion. I hope that's tempting enough. If it is, then we can move ahead. And we begin with, I want you to need me. I strongly believe that the Green Party has to participate in governance as often as possible. We are politicians because we want to make the world a better place. We ask citizens to vote for us to be able to realize our vision to the society. And as such, I do not agree with the people who think that a Green Party should stay in the opposition. Of course, staying in the opposition lets you stay clean, lets you stay pure, and it is true that we are really good at attacking bad government decisions. That is true. But at some point, you have to want more. Because the only way to make our green vision true, it is to do it ourselves. You will have, of course, to be necessary. Entering a coalition in which you are not really needed to ensure the majority is an enormous risk. And by needed, I mean really needed. A ménage à trois can be exciting in the beginning, but if the other two stick together and you aren't really required, well, you won't be very productive. I don't think you will be the father of the child, if you understand what I mean. If you can never take a chance, if you can never take a stance and always have to rely on the goodwill of the others, well, your dreams and desires won't have much of a chance. The first time Groen, my party in Brussels, stepped into a national government in Belgium, we were necessary. You can see it here. The Liberals and the Socialists came 1 seat short to form a majority. And so we signed a pact with them, and everything seemed possible. It gave us the possibility also to kick the Christian Democrats out of the government for the first time in 50 years. And that alone was already a reason why we wanted to do that. We thought also that we had a lot in common with the others. And in the beginning, it was really a walk in the park. But then, at the end of the mandate, one opposition member changed its mind, and he joined the Liberals. And then everything changed, because the Greens were no longer necessary. And certainly the Socialists and the Liberals seemed to get along with each other very, very well, and they regarded the Greens more and more as a pain in the ass. We had to fight battle after battle. The others placed all the sins of Israel on our shoulders, and we lost the next election dramatically. Groen, my party, was not even present anymore in the national parliament. That moment defined our first rule. We want to participate, but we have to be necessary. Want them to need you. Chapter 2. I want it that way. Whether you're negotiating a coalition agreement for the city council, for a regional government, or for the national government, know what you really want, know what you could possibly want, and know what you absolutely do not want. And be specific. That's very important, and this seems to be the obvious way to go, but I've seen it go wrong way too often. As Greens, we usually know very well what we do not like. We are against a new incinerator, we are against nuclear power, we are against wider highways, and so on. So when we enter a majority, we begin most of the times with our no lists. And of course, we have the right to do so. But when you negotiate a majority agreement, every decision comes at a cost. And the money, of course, is limited. So every time you choose to stop something, you choose also not to realize something else. And that can be a problem. That can be a problem because if all you're doing is stopping things from happening and not giving shape to new things, what will you show after 4, 5, or 6 years in that majority? People may be grateful in the beginning, but gratitude doesn't last forever. In Brussels, we choose to stop the development of a large planned logistics center that would lead to 800 trucks movements a day in the city center. And in return, we had to agree to the development of a new shopping center. We weren't very happy with that, but we had to choose. And because we had to choose, we thought that the mall would be more acceptable than the trucks. 5 years later, at the end of our reign, nobody talked about the logistics hub anymore because it didn't exist. But a lot of the same people were angry with the Greens because we had allowed the shopping mall to come up. The other parties were smarter. The other parties were smarter because for the things they weren't happy with, they pinned the blame at us, while simultaneously saying, but have you seen all the marvelous things we have done, we have realized? So I'm not saying you have to agree to everything. What I mean is that you have to choose your battles. What I'm also saying is that we are not responsible for cleaning up the messes made by others. You do not become a good politician by stopping something another politician did. You become a good politician by taking a step forward in the realization of the city of your dreams. And you do that with the help of very concrete decisions, brick by brick, tree by tree. I was 27 years old when I became a deputy mayor in the city of Brussels, the capital of Europe. Nobody expected that, least of all me. Anyway, we decided to get involved and proceeded to negotiate the coalition agreement of the city of Brussels. And really, we had wonderful ideas. Really, we were going to change the world and certainly the city. One great idea after another found place in the agreement text, and to be honest, our coalition partners encouraged us. Write it, they said, it's marvelous, it's fantastic, it's beautiful. Their text, well, to be honest, their text couldn't match up with ours. It was just a bunch of irrelevant details, we thought, and they had no great ideas. Behind their backs, we even laughed at them because, in our opinion, they had no vision. Until we really started. And it was then that we noticed that they could implement their details right away, while we were struggling to translate our great ideas into concrete actions. And again, our coalition partners said, but we didn't understand it like that. We did understand that differently, and there's no more money for that. Why didn't you ask that right at the start? So for 6 years, I had to fight for every step I wanted to take, because in the beginning, we didn't know what we really wanted. So in your election program, you can write that you want to give everyone access to greenery. But in your negotiation notes, you have to translate that. Say that you want to plant, for example, 5,000 trees, or do as we did in Brussels, and say that you want to create a big new park. In our case, they agreed, and so for the first time in ages, we made a big new park in Brussels. This was the design of the new park. You see, it's very beautiful weather in Brussels. It's always in photos who are showing the future. It's always nice weather. But if you look at the reality, and of course it's not really finished yet, but people are already going there for walks, to play with their children and to have a picnic and so on. You see, in reality, sometimes it's good weather also in Brussels. In a similar vein, it is good to say that you want to fight global warming. But it is better to say that you want, for example, that all new buildings have to meet passive energy standards. We did that, and despite being skeptical at first, our coalition partners agreed, and for almost 3 years now, every new building in Brussels has to be low energy. And I'm not only talking about housing, I'm also talking about big office buildings, as you see on these pictures. Third example, it is nice to declare that you want a solution for traffic jams, but what you need to do is demanding money. Money for new metros, for new trams, for new buses, and for the deployment of a bike-sharing system, which is what we did. And our government decided to build a new 5-kilometer metro line, new tramways in separate lanes, and to arrange for 5,000 shared bikes in the Brussels capital region. Every decision, every choice costs money. Money that you can spend only once. At the beginning of a new period, everything is set to zero. Everything can be discussed, can be redistributed. It's a chance that you get only once. So do not miss that chance. And then the third chapter. Take me to your heaven. Not being in control is frustrating, isn't it? so is watching the ruling parties making the wrong choices over and over and over again. So when we, as Greens, get a shot at the driver's seat, we often tend to promise our supporters that we will realize our entire mission at once. I have one very good advice for you. Do not do that. Do not promise that. In most countries, and particularly in Belgium, a government agreement is a compromise. When I became Secretary of State in the Brussels Capital Region, there were 6 parties at the table. You had liberals, you had socialists, you had 2 Christian democratic parties, and then you had the French-speaking Greens, Ecolo, and the Dutch-speaking Greens, Groen. Such a coalition agreement cannot just focus on the translation of our green program, of course. Of course, you need to find a strong green touch in it. It must be green enough. But you will also need to recognize the other parties' concerns. Can you live with that, or can't you? That becomes, at that time, of course, the all-important question. We asked our Green members for their confirmation during a special national congress about our Brussels government participation. The result was a nearly unanimous yes. Later, in many discussions with our own supporters, I could rest assured that I wasn't moving forward alone on the basis of my decisions. No, I had the final go ahead from a National Green Conference, and that went a long way in making me feel at ease and thus a lot stronger. But of course, you have to get the message across to your own supporters regarding what you stand for and also what you had to swallow. And you also need to explain that it's not your party program that you run, but that it is, in fact, the government program. And they have to judge you based on that, on the government program. This is very important, because if your members don't agree on where you stand, they will attack you. They will attack you all the time, because what you do will never be good enough, will never be green enough. And you can handle attacks from other parties, but attacks from your friends are really lethal. During our first national government participation, Groen ignored that. And the result was that our own Greens, even our own members of parliament, constantly expressed their disappointment in us. They communicated that they had expected more, that we could not exert much influence on the government decisions, and I have already told you what the result was. We were totally swept away. But when we entered the Brussels government, we learned from that experience. And we communicated how we realized or wanted to realize the key green issues in the government program. And we also clarified our stance on anything that we weren't too keen on, but had accepted nonetheless in order to find a balanced agreement. And at the end of our tenure, we increased our score from 11.5% in 2009 to almost 18% in 2014. So you see, it is possible to participate at a majority as Greens and to grow. The fourth chapter. Let's try something new. Whenever a Green politician enters a government, municipal, regional or national, people automatically assume that you're going for environment and energy. What else would you like as a Green politician, right? Of course, this is partly our own fault. If you name your party Groen or Green, you can't really be surprised if people think you're only interested in parks and animals and windmills. But ecology is a society vision that goes far beyond just the birds and the trees and the flowers and the trees. We don't save nature because we love it that much. We do it in the first place because we like people. And people cannot live without nature. We want to give our children and our grandchildren the chance to live good and hopefully better lives. And that can only happen if we give them a world that we haven't screwed up. The green baseline in Belgium is more humane, fairer and healthier, in other words, green and social. And so I was Secretary of State for Mobility and Equal Opportunities for Women, Ethnic Minorities, People with Disabilities, and Lesbian, Gay and Trans people. My colleague had housing, and the third Green Minister was responsible for environment, but also for hospitals and elderly care. Moreover, we tried to link the green approach to other domains. We thus created an alliance, work, environment, because we know that the improvement of the environment can also create economic opportunities and new jobs. The regional government, together with trade unions and employers' organizations, launched a comprehensive agreement on sustainable building, on water, sustainable food, and waste as a raw material. So in Brussels, we showed that ecology and economy actually form a logical partnership. The fifth chapter is let's do it together, or it's more fun when you have multiple partners. Work together. Work together. The most important thing is that your ideas are realized, not that you did it all by yourself. So search for partners and do it on three levels: citizens, the administration, and the other political parties. You can have great ideas, but if your proposals are not supported by a large number of people, implementing them will always be difficult. Ever since the late 90s, our program has reflected our intention to make the center of Brussels car-free. But the idea was always dismissed by the others as premature. Until 2012, when just before the local elections, a university professor wrote an open letter about reclaiming the city center. And he suggested that the people of Brussels should have a picnic on the main avenue of Brussels, which actually happened. A few thousand people picnicked on the avenues, and a little while later we got our large pedestrian zone. Even though Groen was at that time not part of the majority, one of our main goals was realized. You see, it's now like that. People are walking on the streets all the time. It works really well, and it will be like that if the works are beginning, which will happen in the month of June normally. You can also do it the other way around, of course. It is, if a successful citizen movement has positions that are close to your own vision, well, why not incorporate those positions into your party program? You immediately make lots of new friends. Of course, if you do get elected, then you should also do something with those ideas, because you do not want the civil movement feeling abused and losing their faith in you, but it is possible to act like that. If you are elected, you have also to invest in good relations with the administration. That's really necessary. During my first visit to the administration as a young deputy mayor, the Director General asked me, "Do you know who was deputy mayor about 10 years ago?" To be honest, I did not know. He said, nobody knows. Majors come, majors go. The only thing that lasts is the administration. Of course, he was a very arrogant man, and he wanted to intimidate me, the 27-year-old newcomer that I was. But he did also have a point. If you can convince the administration to share your society vision, you get an incredible boost and much better chances of your policies continuing to exist even after you have left the government. If the administration, on the other hand, decides to boycott you, well, then you need all the luck that you can get. And then the third partner you have to search for is your partners in the government, your colleagues from other parties. Trying to be friends with people who are ultimately your rivals and have sometimes very different visions for the society might seem strange, but again, you are in it together. People don't like quarreling politicians. They want to see that you control the city and that you know where you're going together. A football player who thinks he alone carries the game will seldom score, but the fans will love each and every player in a team that wins the cup final. Then the sixth chapter, talk dirty to me. Well, it is not really about talking dirty, of course. It's about communication. But for many Greens, however, a communication sometimes seems a very dirty word. Green politicians work. In Belgium, we are seen as people who know what they speak of. Our views are well-founded. So we tend to write manifestos spanning 800 pages of innovative ideas thought through in every nuance. But unfortunately, we are often so busy with all of that that we forget to communicate about it. And the trouble is that if we do not communicate, well, nobody will do it for us. So talk about what you do, talk about what you think, and also say that you are the best, because we are. And show it. A picture speaks 1,000 words. When we decided in Brussels that all new buildings should achieve the passive standard for energy, we also opened example buildings. People could walk around in there and get a feel of what a passive and sustainable building is. And for the same reason, we made the opening of almost every bike sharing station a little event of sorts. We did this in every municipality, so that people could see over and over again that we were working on encouraging cycling and better mobility. Making it specific, make it real, and repeat your green message 1,000 times. You think everybody heard your message. Well, in reality, it goes in one ear and out the other. My Green colleague in Brussels, in the Brussels government, did a little experiment. He sent some people in the streets with iPads containing pictures of all the Brussels ministers. And they asked the Brussels inhabitants if they knew these people. Brussels has approximately 1.2 million inhabitants, and we have 5 ministers and 3 secretaries of state. So they asked the Brussels inhabitants if they knew those people. Well, very little people did. And when they asked what those ministers were doing, almost nobody could answer. Don't think it's any different here. So repeat your message over and over again. Repeat, 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 repeat. And if you think it's enough, well, then repeat it at least one more time. And don't count on the press for that. It's a bonus if you're often on television or in the newspapers, but this won't happen all the time, especially not for local politicians. Fortunately, we now have Facebook, we now have Instagram, Snapchat, and so on. And we all have a multimedia tool in our pockets. We all have a smartphone. A video of my colleague in the federal parliament in which he attacks a minister on the conditions for becoming Belgian was published by Groen on Facebook. And in less than a week, it had already been viewed 80,000 times, and it has been shared more than 500 times. A video message with our president has been viewed more than 100 times and was also shared some 500 times. It costs almost nothing, and you decide what you show the people, not somebody else who is commenting what you want to sell. There's no TV campaign that can beat that, of course. And of course, it takes some effort. It needs a thoughtful multimedia strategy. Invest in it. Invest in it, and you can reach an audience that you never will reach through traditional channels. Often, if it's well done, people are willing to share your message on their social media pages and accounts. And you know, if somebody else says that you're doing good, well, you're really doing good. If we communicate, it's also important that we try to do it in a positive and a constructive way. Tell people how beautiful society can be. Let them dream. Let them dream of a green world. Do that when you are in majority, but also do that when you are in the opposition. Don't think we are in power, we do good things, so we will be rewarded. People have a very short memory. You can use, of course, your achievements to show that you do what you promise, but then you must give them a new reason to vote for you again. And if you are in the opposition, showing how bad the majority is will not be enough. Attack, but always show that you have a better solution. If the government brings out Tina, well, show them Tita. If the government says there is no alternative, show them this is the alternative. I said it before. People do not like sour politicians who just complain and accuse. Be positive, be constructive, and use every attack on you as an opportunity to explain your green vision, your dream for a better world. And so we come to the conclusion. We are almost at the end of the book. Time to forget all the theory and to convert it into practice. And of course, that's not easy. The traditional parties will not help you with that. They have always hated us. They have always hated us because we are ambitious. We, as Greens, we see the big picture. We go for drastic changes. And that is something what scares a lot of people. They also hated us because we are right. Others can delay or postpone some changes that are needed, but they always end up accepting that our vision is the only real option. So they see us as a threat. They see us as a threat to the established values and to their own power position. And they do not like that feeling. So they try to fight us. Well, let them. Let them hold on and never forget that we are the future. And that future is green, and that future is unstoppable. Good luck, and thank you.
Thank you, Bruno. Now we have time for discussion, questions, comments.
Nobody.
No? Nobody? Everything clear? Okay, I mean, I suggest that we can go for a second presentation from Carmen Munoz, and then we can have a joint discussion. That might be a best way to warm us up. Thank you, Carmen. So now we have two different cities as examples, and hopefully we have a bit more curiosity or interest. So I open the floor for questions or comments. Okay, I have actually two, so maybe we can start the discussion. For Bruno, maybe it would be good to hear kind of update, if you can say a couple of words, what is your current most intensive preoccupation of Greens in Brussels, and how these principles, 6 points you talked about, how they apply to this case, what are the weakest, what are the strongest, and how does it function in a very concrete case of a certain proposal or struggle you are pushing forward?
We are now in the opposition. We did very well after the elections, in the elections of 2014, but you can do it too well. And which means that if you're becoming too big, well, and you're not the biggest one, then sometimes the biggest one chooses to have two more powerless other parties to work with, because they lost the elections, and so they ask less than we would have done. So that's the reason why we are in the opposition now. The themes, and it came a little bit automatically. The theme around what we are working now most of the time is good government. Because there are a lot of dossiers who are linked about that. You have some scandals with the Socialist Party, who was in power for years and years, and we have some scandals about people who were very well paid to have some mandates next to the politics. Some companies who are made by the government to manage things for multiple municipalities. Okay, that's a good thing. Municipalities have to work together for some things. It was about water, about energy, some things like that. But they created a system in which people who are nominated by politic were having very, very high salaries to do almost nothing. And so that's a scandal who was coming up. We have another big dossier now. That's the new national football stadium, which will be made in Brussels. In principle, we are not against a new football stadium in Brussels, but the way everything is decided is it's not public, it's not open. It's always some politicians who take some decisions and who try to push those decisions through, and that's something we attack time after time after time. And because they do not respect the rules, and because they try to be, let's say, creative, we win all the time. We are not the only ones. It is with some citizen movements that we are doing that, fighting that struggle, but we win, and every time again they have to correct, they have to admit that they have done things who were not totally in respect of the law, some things like that. So that's good governance. That's the things on which we are working now the most. And it is also for that I say, for me, being green is more than only trying to have more a big park and more trees and things like that. It is also it's a social duty that we have. If you do not take that responsibility well, you cannot make a better world. And as I said, the three things we do is more healthy, more humane, and also fairer. And that fairer is good governance, is honest governance. We don't want green politicians to combine a position as member of the parliament and to be a deputy mayor in a municipality. We say you cannot do two jobs at the same time. Lots of our colleagues do that. We, as the Green parties, we do not do that. And now we feel that things are changing in the mentality of the people, and we have a momentum, and so we can push a lot of that kind of things to be realized. And now we have, for the first time, we have the discussion with the other parties on, is it logic that you have two jobs if you are a politician, or isn't it? And we hope that we will be able to change that.
So when you're speaking about fairness, it seems you're referring mainly, or maybe I missed something, to these types of issues of like ethical behavior, right? Or so, as opposed to other political parties trying to act in an ethical way, not to be in conflicts of interest, not to be more transparent, more accountable, etc. But and this, I think, is also common with some of the other municipalist movements. And I know in Barcelona they have a strong ethical code, and there's even issues of, as opposed to other MPs, everyone receives, I think, 5,000 euros, and the Barcelona and Común people put aside immediately, I think, something like 2,000 or maybe even more. It's a significant amount for many of the individuals involved on a very personal level, because many of them aren't actually don't have that much money. So for them, it's a personal decision to make. And I wonder how people in Zagreb or Belgrade or some of the platforms would really be, whether we would be or they would be as ethical in these types of choices and as consistent in these types of choices. It's certainly something that I think is a good point in time to be discussed further, how that's applied in these cases of Zagreb, Benash, and so on. Of course, in the very optimistic scenario that there's lots of councillors in these types of situations of conflict of interest and so on. But the question was whether the concept, that was a digression, and I'm sorry. The question was whether the concept of fairness has anything to do with redistribution or social matters on housing or social policies, and how, do you have a red element to your Green party as well in a more redistributive sense?
Yeah, it's for me it's both. So it's true. It is when I talked about good governance, it is about ethics and ethics in politics, and I think it is very important to try to discuss that. Or it's more easy to discuss that and to decide that before you're a big party. Once that people are in certain positions, well, they always can explain why they need an exception and why they work very hard, and so they deserve to have a lot of money. And as Greens, we do not say that you cannot earn good money in politics. And so it's not that we say you have to earn the same as somebody in a local construction fabric at the fabric. A factory. So we say you have a lot of responsibility. If you one reason to have paid a decent amount of money is also because it makes you independent, and it makes you are not vulnerable for other people who will say, well, I give you some money and you will do that for me. So it is. We think you can earn your living. But we are not talking about things like 6,000 to 7,000 euros. I, as a member of parliament, normally I win 5,000 euros a month. but I have to give 1,500 euros to my party, to Groen. So, but I still have 3,500 euros, which is a lot of money, of course. But we have had a discussion, and we said, okay, that's something we can accept. A local, a deputy mayor, we accept that they have, and it depends, of course, of the scale of the city, but that they have 3,000, maximum also 3,500 euros. So we have had that discussion, but we are not it's not like we have the PTB, which is the Parti des Ouvriers Belges, the workers' party, who said, no, our members of parliament can gain maximum, I think, 1,500 euros. We are not going that far. But it is a question, it is a discussion we have had also. The other thing is, it is also a question of taking your social responsibility. And I've said that also in my presentation. It is green and social. Those two legs of our party as equally important. We say we have a responsibility for people who are in difficulties, who are minorities. We are the party who defends, who asked always for the right to vote for people coming from migration in Belgium. We are the party who really stands for LGBT rights. We are a party who defends women's rights, but also says people who are Muslim, for example, and who have difficulties now, who are discriminated, well, we are at their side to defend that. And that is not a very popular position at this time. Because everything is becoming more and more nationalistic, more and more right-wing, more and more people are more and more afraid from everything was coming from behind. There we try to be as respectful as we can be, and we defend that kind of things. But often we are the only ones. And for me, that's a part of it. When I said that my colleague was responsible for housing, it was mostly for social housing, being sure that there was enough social housing in Brussels to give the possibility to everybody to have a decent house. You cannot, for me, you cannot separate one from the other. Socialist parties try to do that, and I think that often people say that we are we have much points in common with socialist parties, and that is true for the social part. But it is not true for the green part at that time, because that is something which is accessory for them. And for us, it's also, it is of course the core of our being. But we see the two together, and we say they cannot be separated one from each other. And you see it also around us. You see it in the Netherlands, where the party is even called Groen Links, which means green left, and left they mean as a social party. And I think that the places where the Greens are really growing and are able to put their mark on the politics, I see it's everywhere where they choose to have the two legs together, the green and the social things. And I think that's the same what's happening in Spain also.
Question for both presenters. What are the lower levels of representation and citizen participation in your cities? Do you work with lower levels, and how do you work with those lower levels?
I'm not sure if I understand you.
So are there lower levels than city council?
No, they are not. So Brussels is a region from almost 1.2 million people. And in that region, you have 19 municipalities. And that's officially the lowest level. We have lots of discussions on, do we need 19 municipalities? Because there are a lot of people who think, well, it's 1 million people, let's put everything together and let's make some districts who are littler, but who have less power. So that's a big discussion now. We, with the Greens, we are not really outspoken about that. What we try to do is to oblige a government, if it's a municipal government or regional government, to have a lot more participation of all the citizens. Because now we have some procedures, but let's say if they want to redo the whole city center in a pedestrian zone, and it is a very big project, well, they need 1 month to ask the people for their opinion. That's what they are doing now. It's a dossier from almost 1,000 pages. So you know that if you say, well, you go to the city center and to the administration and you ask, then you can look at, and then you give your remarks, you know that very few people will do it. That's not really participation. So we try to put in law texts that the government and the city government is obliged to have a real participation before they can take such big decisions. Of course, I think that a city council and a parliament, it is democratically voted, so they have the right to decide at the end. But now we have the impression that they decide without really knowing what people are thinking, and that the procedures as they exist today are, well, it's formally, but they are not respected by the spirit, and we try to change that, and we hope that it will work, because we see that more and more, if we have big projects, that people, if they have the impression that they are not heard, are going to justice and to try to stop it. And they always find a way to stop it for one or another reason. And so it's frustrating for everybody. And we say you have two ways to do that. You have the long-short method and the short-long method. The short-long method is the government thinks, and we are going to decide, and we show that we can decide and that we have a vision, and we push it. And then you have people who are going into justice, and so that means that it takes ages before you can really start the things. Or you have the other way around, where you take your time, you listen to the population, you do real participation, and that takes a lot of time. But then when you have done all of that, well, you can say, okay, that's a decision who is supported by a majority, really a majority of the people, and now we go for it. And you will see at the end that that is the real short way to do it. But it's still, sometimes it happens, but it's still an exception. And we, with the Greens, we try to convince our colleagues that it is the way to really work.
And how do you see methods of doing that?
Well, participation. You have a few methods who exist, who are have been developed. It's not in Dutch we say you don't have to reinvent the hot water. It exists, and we ask them to implement all of that. We have also city movements, citizen movements who are doing that now aside of the government, who are not paid for that, but who are doing that and who are doing that very well. So I think government can work together with them. Those movements are not enemies. They want to change the city also in a way that's better for everybody. So it is not something really, it's not revolution. It's not a revolution we want, but we want them to implement that. And it's sometimes frustrating, but lots of politicians think that once they are in power, that they now have to show that they and they alone have the good ideas, and of course that's not true. In Antwerp, they have done it recently. They want to reorganize the mobility around the city, and it's a project who dates from, I think, even before the year 2000. And they had a big plan with a big bridge and extra highways and all things what you want. And everybody, and on a political level, it was decided rather quickly. And then people said, no, we don't want that. And they did some people referenda, and most of the people of Antwerp said, no, we don't want that. And you had at least 3 different citizen movements who by crowdfunding, get enough money to go to the judge and to stop it. And they did it again and again and again and again. And at the end, and it's now, I think, 2 years, they said, okay, we will try to have a coordinator who has to moderate, who has to go to the people, and we want together to find a solution. And for the first time in almost 20 years, now on year and a half time, they have found a solution who is acceptable for the citizen movement, for most of the citizens, and also for the politicians who were in the beginning at the origin of the project, because it's always also answering at their concerns. And so you see, it is possible to do it, but it took 15 years of going to justice before they saw that they had to change the way to do it. And there, also in Antwerp, it were the Greens who were one of the motors of those citizen movements and of those changes. I can give you some local examples, what we did in some municipalities in Brussels. When I was State Secretary of Mobility, we had some experiences with streets that had to be redone. And it were local streets, but still there was some tension about how are we doing that. And so we said, okay, we ask for a negotiator. And then we ask the people, do it yourself. The only thing what we want is that you have to take in account that, voila, you cannot totally close the street because it was a street who was who was linking to neighborhoods. So it was not possible to close it totally. And you have to be sure that the majority of the people, the large majority of people who live in the streets and around the streets, are supporting the project. And they did it. And in the beginning, I thought, well, they will redo the streets more or less as the street is now, because then you are sure that everybody will move on. But the streets really changed, and they managed to find support in the streets with all the people living in the streets themselves. On the other hand, what you see most of the times when a municipality is trying to change some streets and to say, well, we'll want less parking spaces and things like that, that everybody is against it. And well, in those streets, we saw that they decided to do it themselves. And so I really believe it is possible. Of course, you cannot always do it on a very local level. If you say, well, we will redo the whole city center, you cannot only ask the people living on those streets, because it has an impact much further than only in the real city center. But also for that kind of things, it is possible. There are methods who make it possible to do that.
Okay. Any more? Okay. If not, thank you again for your contributions and for opportunity to be with us.